Hi and welcome everybody to a new video. I am so inspired by this color palette, and that was last week's video. I'm going to link that up in the top right corner info box in case you haven't seen it. And I wanted to use the same colors today. I'm just preparing my paints and my supplies, and as I was not 100% sure which colors I've used, I'm just swatching them onto the left side. That's a watercolor journal from Kunst and Papier, and the paper is not very thick, but I really like the paper for an art journal. But I usually do not paint on the left sides because the paper gets quite buckling when you paint it with watercolor, and that does not come back to a flat paper. Usually, for example, in my Royal Talents sketchbook, when I use wet mediums, it it buckles a lot, but once you close the book and let it sit for, let's say, a day, the paper gets back to its almost to a smooth surface. So that's not the case here, and that's why I usually only paint on the right sides, and I use the left just to try out colors, swatch some stuff, whatever I need. Yeah, I'm using the Paul Rubens watercolor palette again today because that was the one I used for the double spread you've just seen, and I wanted to use the same colors, so I'm going for the same watercolor palette, and I'm doing one of my standard, I would say, watercolor pages. I love that grid journaling with the watercolors and then making marks. And today I do not start out with the watercolors. I'm starting out with a Derwent Inktense pencil. And the reason is often it happens that I place these squares a little bit off center, and I wanted to make sure that I get that painting today centered, and that's why I just sketch out that grid a little bit. And I use this also as kind of a mark making tool for the background, and make some thicker lines, some scribbles, and it's any kind of blue from the Derwent. I don't have in mind which one it was. It's a darker blue and it matches my color palette. And now I'm going in with the watercolors. Yeah, and in my first layer, I just lay down the colors with a lot of water. I let these squares bleed into each other and just play a little bit with the paints. I really love that, and that's also a good way to explore a new color palette or to just try out new paints and explore how they work. I hope you are going to enjoy the process, and it would be really helpful for my channel if you leave a comment and like the video. That would be really nice. Yeah, enjoy the process. I don't think I'm going to talk too much today. I will try not to talk too much, but I will jump in, of course, in case something interesting is happening. I forgot to mention that I also have the core watercolor palette in front of me, and I did use the cobalt teal from the core colors last time as well. It has a bit more of a high flow, and that's what I like. I'm often throwing in a color from this palette within other colors because I really like that feathering effect it has. I try to find a good range of values. That's why I'm now mixing some really dark blue, and I also picked up some of the paint to make it lighter again in some areas. It's really important that you do not paint every square with full color. It makes everything more loose and vibrant when you have some lighter areas and also some darker areas. And I really try to mix that up to make everything more interesting. I'm going to link up all the products I'm going to use in the video description, and there will also be a link to my blog post where you can have a look at the finish page and the close-up images. Whilst the paint is still wet in some areas, I'm going in with the Derwent Inktense pencil again, and I'm just making some more marks and scribbles into the wet paint. I really like how the texture appears from the Inktense pencil when you draw into wet areas. I also sometimes dip the nib of the pencil, the tip of the pencil, into water, and then I get a lot more pigment, intensified pigment from that pencil. I picked up my fern brush and I just wanted to create a little bit of texture with it. Just a different kind of brush stroke to bring in more depth. That's what you get when you use different tools or also different ways to use a brush, different brushes, other mediums. You get different textures layered up on each other, and that creates a lot of depth. If you want to see more watercolor videos, you can join my monthly membership in the mixed media play tier, which is the second tier. You will get an extra video every other Saturday, and often I throw in a bonus video throughout the month. I'm now going to let that page dry completely, and here I'm back. I wanted to add a little bit more texture using stamps. I just add a few. I really like these stitching borders because they give me the vibe of a patchwork thing. And I'm adding those in, and I think I'm going to add in a little bit more. I think it's a really nice way to add different texture. Also, adding some collage would be an option to bring in just something that's totally different. And I really like text peeking through a abstract mixed media work. I don't know why. I really like numbers or any kind of text. That's quite nice. And I'm using a VersaFine Clear black ink to stamp. That's my favorite ink. You just can't use it over acrylics because the ink wouldn't dry. But here on the watercolor paper, it's just perfect. I'm stamping some numbers. I'm going to link up the stamp sets underneath. And I think I'm going to stamp 2 butterfly wings. As I recorded so many videos, I can't remember what I did on which page. So that's sometimes a bit difficult to remember. Yeah, I'm stamping that butterfly image. I really like kind of a hidden object on the work that you don't see maybe at the first sight, just at the second view, and those things can be quite interesting. Also, when you do that with mark making, just do some mark making that's not as intense, just in the background a little bit, and that's something the viewer can discover when looking a little bit longer on the painting or on the spread. I now do some more mark making. Not sure if this is the Derwent pencil or if this is just a normal pencil. When I'm editing on my phone, I just have a little video in front of me, and that's the Derwent. Sometimes I can't see what I'm really doing. I use this again for some mark making, and I also like here to dip the tip of the pencil into water and then make the marks. That's a technique I use quite a lot, and that works with any watercolor pencil. I'm just a big fan of the Derwent Inktense because they are so intense in color and very, very, very vibrant. And especially when you use them with water, a normal watercolor pencil can be really easily used as a normal pencil and it would look normal, I would say. And when you use a Derwent Inktense, it always is a lot darker and you really cannot see the real color that appears when you add water to them. And that's what makes them very interesting, I think. I'm also coming back in with a brush and the watercolors to make my marks. I'm just playing here. And that's what I love about making art, is that play factor, that what I would have done when I was a child, I would just grab my materials and throw it on the paper. And that's what I love and why I enjoy doing it. I think I didn't like that pattern and I'm going in with water and I try to just cover that up and re-wet it. And here I go over the top with that more opaque yellow I've started the page with. Yeah, whenever I have a spot where I say, oh, I don't like it, I try to fix it. With watercolor, it's a bit more difficult than with acrylics, or if you use opaque mediums. But with these kind of abstract work, you can fix it by using a marker later over the top, a Neocolor crayon. You can incorporate a little bit of collage. These are all ways to just cover up mistakes or things you don't like. I'm adding some splatters here. I really love splatters. It gives you an interesting pattern, another type of layer, which just increases depth. I'm going to let these splatters dry, of course, before I come back in. with more materials and more mark making. Here I have a normal pencil. It's a Pit Matte Graphite. I love these also for drawing because you don't get that shiny surface from them. And this is the 2B, so quite hard. And I don't like this in my sketchbook because it's too hard. I love the 10, 12, or 14B. But here it's quite nice because you get just a thin line with it. And you can make marks in the background that are not visible at first. And that's a thing I really like to use. I mentioned that previously in the video. The mark making part is a bit tricky for me because I don't know when to stop, and sometimes I don't stop early enough. I have the feeling I always have to tell myself I should stop because that's such a fun part of the whole process, playing with all these materials, and just make some marks that are not, it's not hard to do this, it's just fun. I'm now coming in with the Neocolors, and I think I'm going to cover up that area that I tried to fix previously. And that's a good, the Neocolors are perfect for that because they are opaque. The most of them are opaque. The yellows are usually not as opaque, but for example, that turquoise I'm going to use here, that's very opaque and it covers up that area I didn't like. After using all these Neocolors, I also use some acrylic paint pens. This is one from Arrtx with a brush tip, and I really like the marks you can get with them. But I also really like the bullet tips from Posca because you can get perfect little dots. With these brush markers, you can also make dots, but not as easy, but you can make these teardrop shapes, which is quite lovely. And also, of course, any kind of line work is possible. And yeah, I just try to find matching colors. I always try to stay cohesive within the color palette. I not always tell myself which colors to use, but once I have started and I have a certain amount of colors on my painting, I would not introduce a new color in a later layer. Not sure if this makes sense, but I really think that would just make everything look a bit weird, and I try to have everything cohesive so that it's just one image. Here I'm going through my Posca markers. The turquoise is perfect for the painting because it's very similar to the turquoise that I have already on the page. You have to shake these Posca markers really well, because especially the fine liners, the one with the thin line, because other than that you would get just a bordery line, especially with the lighter colors, the white and that light turquoise here. I made a little bit of a mess with the ink. Yeah, I'm just scribbling in a few botanical elements, just some tiny ones. And I think I then would call that page done. I hope I didn't add more to it because there's already a lot going on. And I think it's not necessary to add more to this. I just really enjoy that playtime. At the end, I'm going to leave you with a photo of the finished spread. You also find some recommendations at the end in the end cards that you might be interested in to watch. Yeah, and other than that, I hope you enjoyed that video. If you're still here, please leave a comment. Help my channel to grow a little bit more. And we will see us next time. Thank you so much for watching and have a wonderful rest of the week. Bye.